Hey everyone, welcome back. So today I want to talk a little bit about armor, because ever since armor terms were added to the game, there's obviously a lot more sets of armor. So what does this actually mean for Minecraft? Well, the average player is going to need a lot more armor stands, which is why I invented this thing that I like to call black hole armor stand storage. In theory, this should allow you and your 100 other friends to all satisfy your needs of having a few different armor stands to switch between. And all you have to do to access your specific armor stand is to just walk up to the machine, take out some of this leftover garbage, and put in a number anywhere from 1 to 395, and then push this button. Then, all you have to do is wait an excruciatingly long amount of time for the machine to cycle through every single armor stand and find pretty much the exact one that you're looking for. But how the hell does this machine actually even work? Well, in order to understand that, we gotta go back to a previous design that I uploaded on my channel, where I was trying to solve an extremely similar problem. A while ago, I designed this armor stand storage device that used the cycling of armor stands using these trapdoors and bubble columns, and some various alignments to get them to move in a big circle. And if I remember correctly, this thing stored about 48 armor stands. Now obviously it's a lot larger than that other design that we looked at, and also for some reason that it broke in this version, so I'm just using command blocks to make it look like it's working. Anyways, here's the theory. If we have a really long chain of armor stands, we can put an armor stand at each position in that chain and just cycle through them to find exactly which one we want. Now, the reason why the armor stands move such a tiny amount each time they move is because, theoretically, if we make each movement small, we can put each position in the chain closer together, which means that we can make the whole device a little bit smaller. So how do we make the movements between armor stands even smaller? Well, one way is to move them at an incredibly slow, constant speed, and be able to turn that off for very specific amounts of time. One way we can do that is by using water and cobwebs, and I can turn it off using this button here in the back, which will dispense water in certain positions, allowing us to stop and start this armor stand. Now, something that you might have noticed is that we're using this really weird configuration of water, which seems like an odd choice compared to something like a single long stream. The purpose of this is because we're trying to exploit something called single source flow, which is when a water block, despite being completely contained on all sides, is able to become a flowing source block as it flows from this position to a water source exactly one block down and to the side of it. Now, the advantages of using single source flow, one of them is that it goes away instantly. When we remove the water source, it just disappears, and all water that was flowing into those sources immediately becomes still. On the other hand, if you try to remove the source of this kind of water, it kind of sputters out and isn't nearly as easy to work with. Now, I had originally set this up in a little bit of a linear configuration, but then I realized that I should probably just put in a circle. So that's what this is, but it took way too long for the armor stand to get all the way around, which would result in having way too many armor stands, enough to basically crash your game. So ultimately, I settled on a configuration that was even smaller than this 2x2 setup, and eventually came out to this 1x1 setup, where this armor stand just moves around this central grindstone. Now that we have a way of moving armor stands extremely slowly around a sort of chain thing, let's talk a little bit about how we can actually move them for an extremely specific amount of time. In order to do this, we take some items and we put it into the dropper that I had brought up at the beginning of the video. And what that does is that it turns on this comparator. Once we turn on the machine for the first time, it's actually going to very quickly remove dropper items from this dropper. And the moment that it runs out, this comparator turns on, and basically how long this dropper stays full for is exactly how long we want to spend progressing through the cycle. Once the machine actually arrives at the armor stand that you intend to select, this bubble column that's currently keeping all of the armor stands suspended against these grindstones is going to be swapped to a magma block, which is going to kind of suck down the armor stands. And only the one that passes through this extremely small gap between this boat and this amethyst crystal is going to be the one that displays to you. Since each armor stand is so close together, it's impossible to create a specific enough filter to filter out only one armor stand with normal Minecraft blocks, which is why we're using a boat, which allows us to put it at any position. Now that we know a little bit more about how the armor stand is actually selected, let's talk a little bit about another issue that I faced. One of the main issues is that we actually have no idea where in the cycle we are. Since we can only move the armor stands around the circle a specific amount of time, let's say that I go to armor stand 3, and end up here, and now I want to go to armor stand 7, I actually have no idea how to actually get there, other than if I were to be at armor stand 0, all I'd have to do is make 7 moves. It's impossible for me to know that it takes 4 moves to get to armor stand 7. The way I actually get around this is by using a counting system in the back, which keeps track of exactly how far we've moved in the cycle, and then it simply uses that, subtract from the total number of armor stands, 395, and simply counts that much to reset itself back to the original position. And from there, we can just count everything as if normal. The only flaw with this kind of approach is that it does force the machine to go all the way around the circle in order to zero itself again every time you use it. So if you're trying to go from armor stand 35 to armor stand 36, it's not like it's just going to be able to move one space forward. So what does normal use of this machine actually look like? Well, the idea is that you're going to walk up to it and you're going to put a certain number of items in here. Sometimes this involves actually calculating out how many stacks plus a certain amount of items to get to the specific number that you're looking for. Then you're going to hit this button and wait probably up to 1 minute and 30 seconds. Here I'm speeding up the game. And it's going to find your armor stand and then deliver that to you. Then you can interact with it, put armor on, take armor off as you please, and then when you're ready to reset the machine, you can just hit this button again, which sends the armor stand back to its original position and resets the system so you can use it again. So, time to answer the important questions. Is black hole armor stand storage actually practical? Well, I want to first off preface that this machine is kind of terribly designed. Not because it's particularly inefficient, but because it just simply has some of the worst wiring that I've ever done in basically my entire Redstone career. The design of the interior of this machine almost represents a sort of timeline of exactly how much patience I had to design it. Because right here at the center, where some of the core mechanics were introduced, is incredibly compact and arguably pretty objectively well designed. But then as I started to run into more and more problems, it basically turned into spaghetti redstone wire everywhere. So on to actual use cases. For the record, this thing stores about 395 armor stands. I say about because I've never actually tested the first view or the last view, so they might just not work for technical reasons. But obviously that's maybe a little bit more than the average person or even entire server needs. You'd probably need some pretty expansive documentation to even keep track of all of these armor stands, much less even considering the amount of lag that any one of these given machines is going to cause. Whatever the case, that doesn't really matter to me, because if I only made useful stuff, think about all the things that would pretty much never get made. Anyways, it might be possible to actually make a version of this that has a little bit smaller of a storage capacity with a bit smarter wiring, but I'm not really too interested in that right now. That's about all I have for you today, so make sure to check out my other videos, subscribe to the channel for more useless redstone content, check out the Discord server, and I'll see you next time. Bye!